First You Think is a not-for-profit ministry of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Support us at ucdsm.org today.
Coming up next, a great conversation with Katie Kamienski, Executive Director of the YMCA Supportive Housing Campus. We learn about the Housing First model. I get my first unambiguous answer about Iowa State versus Iowa, and we learn that Katie's quite the bowler. Enjoy the show. It's Great to Meet You is a production of the First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. At First Unitarian, we love radically, grow ethically and spiritually, and serve justly. Unitarian Universalism is a pluralistic religious tradition, meaning we don't have a dogmatic statement of belief. Rather, we covenant with one another to put love at the center of our actions. We recognize the inherent worth and dignity of everyone and our interconnectedness with one another. And so our justice work seeks to affirm that worth for all people. If you think all people should be able to flourish and you believe your spiritual journey is less about dogma and more about how you treat one another in the world, you might be a UU. Let's get to the show. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining me on It's Great to Meet You, the show where we meet the good people of Des Moines out there doing the good work. I'm your host, the Reverend Steve Seek, and I serve as the minister at First Unitarian Church of Des Moines. Today, we have the pleasure to talk with Katie Kamienski, the Executive Director of the YMCA Supportive Housing Campus in Des Moines. Katie, it's great to meet you.
Great to meet you as well, Steve.
Katie, tell us about your work.
Yeah, I would love to. So the YMCA's Supportive Housing Campus is home to 140 men and women who have faced some sort of housing insecurity and or homelessness. And I kind of use those two terms kind of interchangeably, even though they're different. Some of our residents have been what a lot of folks would consider to be traditionally homeless, is how I term it. Folks that have lived outside or maybe in and out of shelters for a period of time. Sometimes that's weeks, months, years, decades even. But a lot of the folks that come to find their home at the Y don't meet kind of that traditional homelessness definition. And these are folks that are everybody's neighbors, family, friends that have faced some sort of housing insecurity for a variety of reasons. We always say we have 140 people. That's 140 stories to tell. Everyone is very different. And a lot of our residents have, maybe struggled with mental health issues in the past and maybe currently are still struggling. Some maybe substance abuse is kind of what led them to housing insecurity. But honestly, I think a large population of our folks are people that have had a couple of bad strokes of luck, a couple of bad choices that led them to need the Y, that led them to housing insecurity. And I think oftentimes people ask, what's the commonality among our residents? And I would say if there's one commonality, I think it's that somewhere along the way, many of our folks have lost their support system. So I truly believe that all of us are a couple of bad strokes of luck, a couple of bad choices or decisions away from being housing insecure. Hopefully, the difference for you and me is that we have a strong support system around us that we can lean on, that we can fall back on, that can lift us up. But if you don't have that, I think those are the series of events that can lead people down a path where they're housing insecure.
Just want to appreciate the work you're doing and the way you're lifting up that tension there around bad luck. When I was doing chaplaincy training in a shelter, I was surprised at how often I would hear a story like this woman who she'd been working overseas. She's teaching English in another country, and she came back when her mother's health started to fail. She mortgaged all of her financial resources to pay for her mother's health care. And then she had some sort of injury that kept her from working. And so within 2 months, she just found herself at this shelter, which was not part of her plan. Several strokes of bad luck at once. I appreciate you lifting that up. But you also mentioned mental health and substance abuse. Are you seeing any trends in the folks coming in now versus 5 years ago or 10 years ago? Can you speak to that?
Yeah, so I've been here about 4.5 years,
Mhm.
and I would say definitely I feel like we're seeing an increase with folks that are having some more significant mental health issues arising. And, it's hard to say. I think sometimes it's access to get those services. And this
Mhm.
is an interesting piece of kind of the cycle of somebody who's having issues around housing insecurity, homelessness, and talking to our residents. Sometimes they really help you to kind of to see the bigger picture here. But I remember last spring we were working on a project actually with a local university, and it was around health equity with different populations of people. And so they interviewed a couple of our residents around health equity with when you're homeless. What barriers do you face? And it's literally all the barriers, right?
Right.
So if you have a physical health issue, a mental health issue, but you don't have a place to call home, a place where you can sleep and feel safe and get a good night's sleep, and a place to plug in an alarm that can wake you up, or your phone that can wake you up. If you don't have transportation, like some of those things that really seem very little add up to, I think, sometimes why I think we see a little bit of a push and increase with folks struggling with some of those issues initially when they come to us. Because how do you address those issues if your housing isn't addressed? And that really speaks to what our model is, Steve. And our model is based on the Housing First model.
Mhm.
And the Housing First model, really, to simplify it, kind of goes back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You need to have your basic needs met before you can kind of really achieve other things. And housing first really means that people need to be housed first before they can start to address the things that might have led them to housing insecurity. So again, if you are not feeling safe and secure, and you don't know, for like, and not just having a place to lay your head on a night, but a place that is your own, that you feel safe, your items feel safe, that you can breathe and rest, how can you really start to address those other issues? So the example I always use with folks to kind of bring us home is, sometimes it's really easy for somebody to say, like, if somebody is homeless, for example, and they're able to work, they're not disabled, they're physically able to hold a job, well, just get a job, right? Because then you would have income and you could have a home. Well, if you don't have a home, if you are truly homeless and you go to apply for a job, the first issue in our world today is most jobs you're applying online, right? So do you have access to have, not every phone, not every app, a phone will support it. So do you have access to even apply? Okay, so you get to the library, you have a computer, whatever the situation is, and you start to apply for a job. And after your name, what's the next thing that they're going to ask you for?
Exactly.
Your address. And that's probably not going to be optional. That's going to be required. So I use that as an example, but that's not an exaggerated example. That's a real example of what people are dealing with. So the Housing First model is really the foundation of what we build everything on. So when folks move in here, this is a low income tax credit property. So folks have to be below a certain income threshold. They have to pass our background check, which we do through a third party. And it's very liberal by design, because we want to be the place of second, third, fourth, sometimes fifth chances. And those are really the two things that they need to be able to move in. And when folks move in, the housing piece of it is really, in a lot of ways, like most other apartment buildings. They sign a lease, they pay rent, and as long as they're in good standing with their lease, and at the end of their lease cycle, they're kind of caught up on their rent. We don't evict for non-payment of rent. We give them kind of that grace period of their lease cycle if they get behind. As long as they're in good standing with their lease, at the end of their lease cycle, they can renew that lease indefinitely. So we consider ourselves to be permanent supportive housing. So that's kind of how the permanent piece of it works.
Yeah. So this is not just bunk beds to keep you safe through this night, but really a longer term strategy.
It is. And it's so there are 140 efficiency apartments right here on our campus. And they're small, but it has everything that folks need.
And privacy.
Yep, the privacy. The security of our building is really big too. So we have a secure building that once you're a resident, you get a key card, and that gains you access into the main building. And then you have to do the key card swipe to get back into the apartment complex, and then a key card for your room. And so like any other apartment building, we're their landlord. We can't enter that apartment without proper notice. And, that's for things like a basic unit inspection before lease renewal, maintenance, pest control, those types of things. That is their apartment. They've signed a lease. And as long as they're in good standing, that's how it can kind of become a permanent piece. And so in their apartment, they have a bed, a dresser, bedding, towels. Those are all things that we provide when they move in, a private bathroom in their apartment, a kitchenette, their own HVAC unit, so controlling their heating and cooling. And so really, sometimes what we see is when folks move in, we might not see them for a little bit because it's just kind of that sigh of relief, like, I'm home. This is a place for me to call home. But the really cool thing about our program is another important tenet of the Housing First model is that it's resident-led. So everything we offer on our campus, and I'll talk about some of those things in a minute, but everything we offer, everyone's invited to, but nobody is forced. Nobody is required. We really are meeting the resident where they're at. Everybody here is an adult, 18 and up. We serve both men and women, but it's significantly more men than women. It's about a 90-10 split. And everybody's an adult. So it's really important to emphasize also treating everybody with that dignity and respect of being an adult. It's really easy, and I think we can all attest to this, times in our life in the past or in the today even, where, somebody is telling you what to do. And, that's never a great feeling. And if it's something that you want to do, that you have the desire to do, chances are the outcome is going to be better. And so that's really a big important piece of our program, is ensuring everything is resident-led. Sometimes, it's easy from our perspective, from anybody's perspective, think, oh my, if Steve would just do A, B, and C, then D could happen. But if Steve doesn't want to do it, Steve's going to figure that out. So those are some really important pieces of kind of the foundation of our program and what that's built on. And so another piece of it too is folks, when they move in, they're building a rental history with us. Maybe they've never had their own apartment. Maybe they've never had their own lease, or maybe it's been a while and they didn't have a great history in the past. So we hope that they're building this positive rental history. And the other piece of it is, it's kind of like an old school choose your own adventure book. For some folks, it's going to be their home and they're going to live here for years and years and years. We have a handful of folks. We've been operating in this type of program for 14 and a half years. And we have a handful of folks who've been with us that whole time. We have other folks that might just be here for a lease cycle or two, and then they move on, and that's great. And we really focus on being a hand up to people versus a hand out.
I guess I hadn't fully appreciated that this was all efficiency apartments, because in my experience, you're trying to address Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but what happens when there's 8 people in a bunk bed is that you never relax.
Right.
And you always have to keep your eye on your stuff, and you're still in survival mode, but you are offering a kind of a model where you can come home.
Exactly.
And with the difference that makes in your brain and your heart, wow, this is extraordinary. How can the Des Moines community help you in this work?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that our community can do is just help spread awareness. A lot of folks don't know we're here. Oftentimes when people visit us for the first time on our campus, they say, I drive by this every day, or we're neighbors to the West End Architectural Salvage Shop and Coffee Shop. They're wonderful neighbors, by the way. And a lot of people say, I go there all the time. I stop in there for a cup of coffee. I didn't know what this was. So we are part of the YMCA of Greater Des Moines. Just our work is a little bit different than, the membership fitness base. But actually, this is what the Y was founded on, was housing.
Yes. Right.
Housing kind of came first with the Y. So we've had several different models of this since we've done housing in Des Moines. But like I said, we've been here doing this program on our campus for 14 and a half years. And another big important piece of what we do, so I kind of explained the permanent piece. So permanent supportive housing. So the supportive piece is also what happens right on our campus. In our community and supportive services building, that is where folks are able to access an array of supportive services. Again, if they choose, it's available to everybody. And that starts with case management. Everybody, when they move in, they are assigned a case manager. That doesn't mean that they have to meet with that case manager, but it's available to them. And that way, if even right now somebody moves in and they're like, you know what, I'm good. I think I'm starting on the right path. I don't need anything right now. They know if a circumstance changes, they know who they can talk to. And we also are able to provide help with rental assistance for folks if they qualify. So everybody pays, the rent is the same for everybody. However, about 90% of our residents have some sort of rental assistance that might be external to us. We have a lot of our folks that have Section 8 housing vouchers. Mm-hmm. We also have a lot of folks that have support in some way from the Veterans Administration, the VA, because close to 50% of our residents are veterans. And that's a really important support for them. And then about every year, probably between 30 and 40% of the 90 are folks that don't qualify for one of those pieces of assistance for rental assistance. However, their income would qualify them to receive rental assistance from us. But we pay up to a certain amount of rental assistance because, again, we want people to be engaged and invested in it. So we don't want to necessarily do for, we want to help and do with. So that's kind of part of that hand up, not hand out philosophy. And then we also provide all sorts of groups and classes, for example, that are related to things, again, that the residents are interested in. We survey our residents regularly with types of groups and classes that they think would be beneficial. Because if I set up a class on how to knit and nobody cares about knitting, then why are we doing it? So we do a lot around financial literacy classes. We partner, most of our groups and classes are through partnerships with other organizations. We have a very lean staff team, and this is our lane. Housing is really our lane, and case management. But if we can find somebody who is the expert in financial literacy, coming in and doing budgeting, talking about mental health topics that are of relevance to our residents, that's what we're going to do versus us trying to recreate a wheel that we probably don't know a lot about. And so that's a really important piece of it. And then we are also always doing things to help build community. So going back to one of my earlier comments about kind of the common denominator with so many folks is that they've lost their support system. So what can we do if people are wanting it, right, to help them build community? So that happens a lot of times just organically, where your neighbors become your friends. And hopefully we've all had this experience in our life too. And they kind of become your chosen family. Again, that's not for everybody. Some people, they don't really want to get to know their neighbors, just like everywhere, right? But for some, that is really going to be an important lifeline. And as staff, obviously, we can provide support, but it's different. It's different when it's somebody who is your neighbor and maybe has walked in your shoes in a different way. And so the community building is huge. So we're doing kind of what we term resident life activities. So, tonight, for example, before our meal, we have bingo with great prizes. We'll do trivia contest. We'll have community meals. And so chances for them to come together. So housing first is kind of our foundation, but what we always say is housing first, community next, because I think that's part of the magic. And we also have right here on our campus, so people are just walking across the hallway to do all of these things to gain access to their case manager. We have an on-site laundry room, which is really important. There's no public laundromat anywhere close to us that I can figure out. And so that's really important, especially if you have a barrier of something like transportation. And we have a well-stocked food, clothing, and hygiene pantry that everybody is able to use one time per week. So really, again, not providing everything that they might need, but what are those essentials that if they can have access to them here without a lot of barriers, they can use the rest of their food budget for other things that they need to get.
Back to your conversation about what are the implicit requirements to getting full-time work. And one of them is clean clothes. Clean clothes for work. Right. A meal in your stomach. Yeah. So hearing these threads of housing first, and then we build community. And it sounds like there are a lot of ways people can show up to help then. If you have specialization around financial literacy, therapeutic interventions, things like that. Then there's the specialist volunteering. But I'm guessing you also need folks to come and help the laundry room and the kitchen. And
Absolutely. So we call our volunteers our volunteer army because they truly are. Like I said, we have a very lean staff. So much of what I even just said would not happen without our volunteers. Our pantry would not be stocked. We wouldn't have, a lot of our groups and classes and bingo tonight without volunteers. We wouldn't have our Tuesday night community meal without volunteers. So volunteers truly help us extend both our mission and our budget because they can do so much. And so volunteering people's time is always huge for us. So we have folks that come in sometimes individually as a group, and they might come in one time, maybe they have volunteer time off through their company, and they come in and they volunteer, and we have a project, and that's amazing and great. We also have people that are able to do volunteer projects offsite for us. We also have probably close to 20 ongoing weekly volunteers that come in and kind of tackle different things. We have a gentleman that comes in twice a week, and he loves to do kind of what we consider behind the scenes, tracking of donations, mailings, things like that. That's kind of where he can see his impact. Other folks want really kind of what we call resident facing activities, serving a meal, helping with a game night, things like that. And so it's also really important for us when volunteers come in that we're making sure that it's mutually beneficial, that for somebody to volunteer, that they understand the impact that they're having. And I think that has been really successful in growing our volunteer program in the last couple of years, is making sure that we're giving them that right connection.
And now we'll do a speed round of questions to help the listener get to know you, Katie. Where's your favorite place to eat in Des Moines?
Well, I will go with Barntown Brewing out in, technically, I think it's Waukee, West Des Moines, I'm not sure. Great local place, great variety of food and drinks, and just a great atmosphere.
Where's your favorite place to go outdoors?
Well, I'm going to say it takes us a little bit out of the metro, but my family were big Iowa State football fans. So going up to Ames, which is a short 40-minute drive for us, and cheering on the Cyclones, especially during football season, is probably my favorite thing.
Oh, you've answered the next question. Cyclones, Hawkeyes, Bulldogs.
Cyclones all the way.
There's no hesitancy in that. Okay.
No.
Listener, take note. And do you have a favorite grocery store?
I go to different grocery stores for different things. Hy-Vee is probably my tried and true, and I grew up as a Hy-Vee gal, but I'm also a big fan of Aldi for certain things.
Here's a question from our kids. Why are grown-ups always stressed?
Grown-ups are always stressed because sometimes they forget to have fun.
Okay, I hope you're all listening, children. And then from the staff, they challenge us to 2 truths and a lie. Do you have 2 truths and a lie that you could tell? And we'll see if I can catch the lie in this.
I am married to my high school sweetheart. We've been married for 30 years. I am a recent champion of a bowling league, and I played volleyball in college.
All right, so here's my read. You took a pause before volleyball to bait me into thinking that that was the lie, but I'm going to say that you are not a bowling league champion.
Steve, you are wrong. I'm as of last week, I'm a champion of our short night out bowling league at Warrior Lanes in Waukee.
I apologize. I will put some respect on that. This brings us to the last part. Is there anything you want to promote? Any events coming up in December or January?
We are actually right in the midst of our annual campaign. So this is the one time of year that we fundraise person to person and ask people to consider making a gift. A gift of any amount has huge impact here. As you can imagine, even $1, we can buy food from the food bank with that. So any gift is huge to us and has huge impact. And so I always encourage folks to consider, if you're so moved, making a gift to our annual campaign. We have a goal of raising $195,000, and that goes to help with our supportive services program. So the rental assistance, case management, all of those things I listed earlier. So it's a pretty significant piece of how we keep that program going. But also, I just really encourage people to learn more about our program and help spread awareness and advocate for us whenever they can.
And I will set links on the podcast to how to volunteer and how to give to the campaign. So those will be up there. Well, Katie Kamienski, it's great to meet you. Thank you so much for joining us today. And that does it for us. Thank you all for joining us. Keep doing the good work, Des Moines.